Some cities with a major sports team cannot get rid of their personas, in a sense. Toronto is no exception, as Toronto has a tendency to choke and all that. I mean, the Raptors for many years choked away playoff victories and all that that could have got them to the NBA Finals. Fortunately, 2019 came in. They beat Golden State to win the championship and bring Canada a title for the first time in 26 years in any of the big four sports. You know, you got the Leafs choking almost every time. The Blue Jays not doing so well, and well, there's no NFL team in Toronto, so you can't really talk about that. Vancouver has a nasty reputation because of the two Stanley Cup riots that happened in the last two times the Canucks made the finals and lost. So in '94, when they lost to the Rangers in Game 7, they rioted almost as soon as the game ended, and as well in 2011 when the Canucks took on the Boston Bruins in Game 7 in Vancouver, but they lost, and then the riots started quickly. But this one city has this weird reputation for being hipsters and for smoking the ganja and, being tie dye and being weird and being part of Portlandia. Of course, we talk about Portland and known for their redwoods, including one who was center for the Trailblazers for many years. But of course, Portland also their basketball team was known as the Jailblazers for a while. I'll play awards with the Trailblazers. I don't know why. Well, I'll tell you why. But anyway, let's take a look. This is the one about the 2000 Trailblazers. We're playing basketball Sims. We're playing basketball Sims. He's playing What If NBA. Cutter's doing What If NBA. Yeah. Oh, all the teams around the world got to know that the Raptors are number one. But what about the Bulls, Wizards, and Pistons? They all have great what ifs, stories about old teams like the Kansas City Kings and maybe even the Minneapolis Lakers. But we all know we're going to do some basketball. He's doing basketball. He's doing basketball. What ifs? Cutter's doing what if NBA? So what if NBA? So the 2000 Trailblazers were a very strong team and all that. They they looked good, but then what about the franchise? Well, Portland was a franchise. I don't know how long they've been in the league. Well, 30 years. So in 1970, in one of the great expansions of the NBA in the 1970s, they decided to move to Portland, Oregon. Well, they moved a couple years earlier to Seattle, so they thought basketball in the Northwest United States would be big. So Portland got a team. Kind of weird. In Oregon? Nevertheless, the Trailblazers were good, with Jack Ramsey being a good coach and all that. Jeff Petrie being a star for Portland for many years. And then, of course, this big redwood coming from UCLA by the name of Bill Walton, who Portland drafted, and it worked out quite well. Portland would go on to the 1977 NBA Finals, lose the first two games to the Sixers, but then win the next four and bring a basketball title to the Northwest. Actually, a few years before Seattle brought one to the Northwest. Portland was known for their jerseys with Blazers Blazers down here, which was kind of cool. Now, Bill Walton was good. When he was healthy, he was effective. Of course, Walton and his leg problems would be hurt. Not the first Portland center to have the problems, and definitely not the last. Portland would struggle along. They would do terribly. In 1984, they had the second overall pick. They actually had Indiana's pick, and at that time in 1984, the two worst teams, the worst teams in the conferences, the East and the West, would meet and have a coin flip to decide who gets the number one pick. The loser would get number two. And the Portland, armed with Indiana's pick, wanted to go number one. But unfortunately for them, Houston won the coin flip. They got Hakeem Olajuwon to complement Clyde Drexler. I mean, not Clyde Drexler, but Portland had Clyde Drexler. So Portland ended up number two. Who would they take number two? This guy from North Carolina, Michael Jordan, sounds good, even though that he doesn't have the numbers. Well, Dean Smith has a system in North Carolina. they decided to go with Sam Bowie from Kentucky, a 7-footer who lost 2 full NCAA seasons because his legs were terrible and all that, and his plantar fasciitis or whatever in his legs. His feet were injuries commonly associated with male ballet dancers. Don't draw conclusions from that. Nevertheless, you know how things go. And the Blazers missed out on MJ, and then Chicago went third and took MJ. A lot of people were upset. Of course, there was this series called Top 5 Reasons Why You Can't Blame. And one of them was about the Blazers for passing over Michael Jordan. There were many good reasons, such as they already had Clyde Drexler and Jim Paxson in the system. Fair enough. And another major reason why they went with Sam Bowie was because they needed a center. And back in the 70s and 80s, if you had a good center, you were prone to winning because there was a streak of 21 out of 22 title holders having a great center. You know, the Lakers had Hakeem. No, sorry, Hakeem. What am I thinking? LA had Kareem. Boston had Parrish. Portland, had Walton. Washington had Unsold. I think they still had him. I can't remember. But yeah, the great teams could have a dominant center, and Portland won it that way. Anyway, Portland would struggle a little bit. They got to the 1990 and 92 NBA Finals. In 1990, they took on the Pistons, the Bad Boys, who got their second straight title thanks to fitting the microwave Johnson's jump shot with like 2 seconds left in Game 5. Portland would do quite well in 92, get to the finals, but MJ put us up 6 3-pointers in the first quarter, in the first game of the series, and gives the big shrug. So anyway, Portland tried their best and all that. Moving on from Clyde Drexler and Kevin Duckworth and all them, trying to be responsible. They had Rasheed Wallace for a while. They had David Stoudemire for a while. Portland looked good for the 2000 season, which we will get to. Unfortunately, many of the Blazers would have troubles with the law, including David Stoudemire, who thought it was a good idea to smuggle weed through a Arizona airport wrapped in tinfoil, which automatically set off the metal detectors. Smooth move, Damon. But yeah, they just got into more trouble off the court than on the court. The Blazers would actually suffer because they went through a 14-year drought of winning a postseason series. Portland got to the conference finals in 2000, which I will talk about. And then 14 years later, Damian Lillard sunk the Houston Rockets with a fantastic three-pointer. Mike Tirico on the call saying the Trailblazers won their first series in 14 years. That's how you know. That's all I know. Damian Lillard would sink the Thunder, I believe, 5 years later on a weird three-pointer that actually nobody thought was going to happen, but it did. Nevertheless, the Portland Trailblazers were a very decent team, and of course they had Damian Lillard for a while and then traded him to Milwaukee. They let him walk, and they've been in trouble. So anyway, let's talk about the 2000 Blazers. All right, so we got the 2000 Portland Trailblazers season, the 30th in team history. The Blazers made some massive moves in the offseason. They got Scottie Pippen from the Rockets, Steve Smith from the Hawks, and Detlef Schrempf. It was weird because Scottie Pippen was a Bull legend and all that. And once MJ retired for the second time, Pippen didn't want to go, and the Bulls dumped him off to Houston. And now he only spent 1 year in Houston and got to Portland. The Blazers were 13-2 to start. They actually were the top team in the league at the All-Star break with 38 wins. They had the second best record in the league with 59 wins. Unfortunately, though, they were ousted in a sense because number one in their division were the Lakers because, that's where Game 7 happened. They actually ended up being the 3 seed in the Western Conference because of the fact that the rules were the two division winners were 1-2. Lakers were 1, Utah would be number 2. However, Portland would actually get home court advantage in the second round. So Portland technically had it. It was just for seeding purposes. And that was the 18th straight year the Portland Trailblazers made it. Anyway, Rasheed Wallace got to the All-Star game years before he got to the Pistons. Damon Stoudemire did well and all that. Raptor fans are pissed off. The Blazers took care of Minnesota in the first round, the Jazz in the second round, and then against the Lakers. They were actually down 3-1 and forced game 7, and we're actually up by 15 with 10 minutes left. Amazing. I forgot. I didn't even realize the Trailblazers were down 3-1 in that series. The Lakers got a 15-0 run, and they won the game 89-84. They got to the championship against the Pacers. They would trade Brian Grant, the Trailblazers, to Miami in a 3-team trade, and Jermaine O'Neal, who was drafted out of high school and was the youngest starter in NBA history at 17 years, 9 months, was traded to the Pacers. The Trailblazers did not win a series till 2014 when Damian Lillard did his three-point shot against Houston, as I mentioned in the history thing, and the Trailblazers would finally make the Western Conference Finals in 2019, be the victims of the Warriors, who then were victimized by the Raptors. The Trailblazers did not have any picks in the 99 draft. They were active during the offseason. On draft day, they got the draft rights to Roberto Bergeson from the Hawks. He would head to the Continental Basketball Association. The Blazers would trade Jim Jackson and Isaiah Ryder, Easy Rider, to the Hawks for Steve Smith and got down on Shrimp on the Jailblazers. So we'll talk about the Jailblazers and all that. So anyway, the Blazers had a 7-player deal with the Houston Rockets. The Blazers traded 6 players for one guy, Scottie Pippen. So the Blazers mortgaged most of its roster. Stacey Augmon, who would be good for UNLV, but not good in the NBA in a sense. Kelvin Cato, I think he went from UNLV too. No, he was not there. Kelvin Cato, Ed Gray, Carlos Rogers, former Raptor, Brian Shaw, and Walt Williams, who also was a former uh, Raptor. Pippen would be the Blazers' starting small forward until 2003 when he went back to the Bulls. I didn't know he went back to the Bulls and all that. So anyway, the 2000 Blazers: Greg Anthony from UNLV, Stacey Augmon from UNLV. That they rock. Oh, the Rockets waived Augmon and the Blazers resigned him. Brian Grant from Xavier, Gary Grant, Antonio Hervey, Joe Klein from Arkansas. Sweet. Jermaine O'Neal from high school, Guy Pippen from Central Arkansas, kind of a suey. Arduino Sabonis was still around. Della Shrimp from the U of Washington. Steve Smith from MSU. Damon Steinmeier from Raptor Rookie of the Year. Rasheed Wallace and Bonzi Wells. Yeah, they won 59 games, but the Lakers ran away with everything with 67. They were the 3 seed and had to face the Timberwolves. They would have faced Seattle in the first round. That didn't happen. Sacramento beat Dallas by 4 for everything in the playoffs. They beat Minnesota twice at home. They lost game 3 in Minnesota, but won game 4 on home turf. The conference semifinals, they lost game 4 to Utah, so they lost a chance to sweep, and then they won the next game. The conference finals, they won game 2 in LA, but they were down 3-1. They had to go back to LA and win the game. Yeah, game 3 was the Ori one, wasn't it? Yeah, it was when Robert Ori hit the 3-pointer, I think, with the buzzer. One of those times. There. So Pippen, Rasheed Smith, Sabonis, and Stoudemire. The 3 S's. Well, Sky's an S, but not so much. So let's talk about the jail. So the Jailblazers, nicknamed because of all turning blind eye to team chemistry and bad sportsmanship. Jailblazers because of the behavior problems. Ruben Patterson was required to be a sex offender. Some players had marijuana possession. Cordell Woods would actually stage dogfights in his house. And dogs were confiscated. Rasheed Wallace was suspended for threatening a referee for 7 games. Zach Randolph attacked Ruben Patterson during practice. Anyway, marijuana and all that. Yep, that was what happened. So now let's talk about the whole thing. What if the Trailblazers did get to the 2000 NBA Finals? So the Blazers would have home court against the Indiana Pacers. Well, they were the second best team in the NBA to the Lakers. But yeah, the Trailblazers would face the Pacers. So anyway, the Blazers Pacers would meet in the finals. Game one would see the Pacers, well, the Blazers lose to the Pacers 103-90 as Jalen Rose would put up 22 points off the bench. Well, Reggie Miller, the legend that is from Indiana, Jalen Rose, former Raptor, future Raptor, Dale Davis, former Trailblazer, Mark Jackson, known for having his wedding ring on his basketball shoes, future Raptor, and Austin Crocier was from Providence. Travis Best, Sam Perkins off the bench, Rick Smits off the bench, Indiana legend. Sam Perkins played for the 91 Lakers, by the way. Derek McKee, Chris Mullin, former Warrior icon, Al Harrington, Jonathan Bender, who was uh, picked up by the Raptors in the draft day, but then they traded him to Indiana for the one of Antonio Davis. Sean Tabak, former Raptor, and Jeff Foster, former Utah Jazz. 13 points off the bench for Perkins. Rashid only 4 points. Nasty. Got the rebounds, but not the points. Steve Smith 21. Pippen 13. Sabonis 14. Steiner 7. Jermaine O'Neal 14 points off the bench in 12 minutes. Yeah, Greg Anthony. Great guy. All that. Antonio Harvey, Joe Klein, and Gary Grant got at least a minute on the court. Game two. Would see more of the same as the Pacers are up 2 games to none as Jalen again comes through 30 points in 41 minutes. Jalen looking pretty good. Everyone got double digits as a starter. They're shortening their bench, only having 6 guys off the bench. There's Al Harrington. How come I never talked about him? Blazers 22 points from Rashid, 17 from Sabonis. Brian Grant and Jermaine O'Neal off the bench with 12 points. Dan Shrimp, 0 points in 4 minutes. Game 3. I'm a good boy. Game 3 sees the Blazers win. 23 points, 10 rebounds from Pippen. So Pippen and Rashid doing their jobs. 19 points from Rashid. Joe Klein. Reggie Miller only got 13 points. Jalen only got 12. Rick Smith's got 10. The only 3 guys on the Pacers with double digits. Game 4 would be the Blazers to win, and they did it. As Rashid, 13 points, 10 rebounds, makes it 2-2. Steve Smith, 20 points for the Blazers. 19 from Reggie, doing his job. Reggie, G-I-E. So, anyway, 2-2. Of course, the NBA Finals at the time was a 2-3-2. So, game 5 in Indiana. Michael. And it would be the Blazers who win again. Rashid, 36. Rashid. Doing his job. Steve Smith, 13 points. Antonio Harvey, Joe Klein, and Gary Grant off the bench. 18 from Jalen, only 12 from Reggie. Best, Smits, and Mullen did score double digits off the bench. Crocier only had 4 points. Only 4. Game 6. We'll see the Blazers win 115-93 as finally a home team won, and it's Portland in game 6. They would have won the championship in 6 games. Damon with 31 points off the bench, basically flaunting his NBA ring at Raptor fans all around the world. Rick Smith scored 20 points in 20 minutes off the bench. He should have been the starter, not Crocier. I don't think Rick Smith was the starter in real life. 31 points from Damon, 12 from Steve Smith. It was like everyone comes in, and then Stoudemire comes out of fucking nowhere. Well, the Trailblazers would have won the NBA title, and maybe, just maybe, they would have behaved themselves. Or probably not. Anyhow, I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.